Hey, everybody, and welcome to this edition of GCNC WorldView. It's great to see everybody. It's been a couple of weeks hiatus, actually, since we last were here. We wrapped up the Cannabis by the Numbers series with Whitney Economics and Improvement Strategies. Great series. You can still check on YouTube and Spotify and all your other favorite places. And we're getting back into the groove now with some of our more traditional formats where we look at companies and brands around the world doing great things. And today is pretty cool because there is a brand out there, which I think everybody has been pretty familiar with. If you spent any time in the cannabis markets over the last 10 years, and even longer if you have been in some of the adjacent spaces with tobacco, with Boveda. But they've made some interesting shifts in some of their products, which a lot of people are familiar with, that we're going to talk about today under the Vivi brand. And we have Emily Standbrook and Kate Holste here. Emily sort of oversees this whole project, and Kate and I have spent a lot of time hanging out at conferences around the world as she heads up the international charge. So, ladies, I want to thank you for carving out some time to join me on WorldView.
Thanks for having us.
It's funny, I'm in this bit of a road trip. Anytime I'm in the States, I like to drive around and see. So I've been in Nevada and Ohio and Virginia and Mexico and all of these places in the last 3 weeks. And it's always interesting to see how the markets change and the consumer preferences change. And it reminds me of how hard it is to segment brands in this complex industry we've got. And you guys have taken on a huge project over the last, year and a half. How long have we been working on this project, Emily?
Since 2024. So a long time.
All right. So that's good. Well, it's finally come to life, but why don't we start, just in case somebody's been under a rock and doesn't really know what the product is. Let's start with talking about what Boveda and Vivi bring to the market. What are we talking about? Because we've covered it a lot here in terms of, the importance of water and all of that. But I'd love to hear you guys describe for people listening exactly what it is that you bring to the market.
So Boveda at its core and at its center is all about protecting people's passions. We've been around for almost 30 years in cigars, in musical instruments, and of course in cannabis for the last 15 years or so. But really what differentiates Vivi specifically is maximizing the enjoyment of cannabis when it comes to post-harvest care. So we have our flagship product, which is Vivi Cure. You can cure in 10 days without any burping. That was launched last fall. And then we have our traditional Vivi Fresh, which is probably what most people are familiar when it comes to Boveda cannabis, but it's all about keeping your flower fresh. So that's maximizing shelf life, maximizing weight, maximizing aroma, and just a smoother smoking experience. And then we have our third pillar of that post-harvest experience, which is Sea Vault, which is kind of like the gold standard for storage when it comes to cannabis.
Yeah, I love that. And I know, whether it's cultivators that I work with in Colombia and Peru, or in Germany, or the States or Canada, like if you're serious about your cannabis and keeping it fresh and optimal, then you know the Boveda brand for sure. And I think Vivi is certainly getting there quickly, but when I asked you that and you recited it, Emily, it came out strong, sounded just like somebody who's been in advertising and communications for quite a while. What's your background? How did you end up heading up this project?
Yeah, so I started in B2B e-commerce, very different market, but I started on an in-house marketing team, then moved into food advertising on the agency side of things, which I think when it comes just to marketing and advertising, getting agency experience is very, very, very helpful. It teaches you how to crank out a lot of work and be very diligent in kind of your purpose and reason being and way to kind of prove success over and over again. But then I moved to Boveda on the sales side of things. So getting some sales experience under my belt. And then I moved over this last year onto the marketing side of things, really transitioning and help kind of laying the groundwork from moving from Boveda over to Vivi. So kind of all over the place, but I think each part of the experience has been very, very helpful. And I've got to work with some really amazing people along the way and learn from people like Kate, who've been at Boveda for over 10 years.
Yeah, I'd like to just add to that. So when I actually recommended Emily come to Boveda, and at the time, like there wasn't really a good spot on the marketing team that was a fit. So it took a little convincing to have her look at the sales side of things. But I think it was great that when an opportunity popped up that really blended kind of that full, set of experiences, it was kind of like the purpose of why it was meant to be. It came to fruition a few years later.
Yeah, I love that. Been in and out of advertising and Marcom for almost 30 years now. And when I talk to folks that differentiate so linearly between marketing and sales, I always remind them, like, at the end of the day, they need each other. Like, sales is not all marketing and marketing is not all sales, but without either one of them, nobody wins. So it's good to understand the complete flow. And, one of the challenges I think always in cannabis in particular and the international markets, Kate, is you've been looking at how you take Vivi into all these different countries with all these different cultures and languages and segmentations. Like, it's hard enough with a singular brand that people have gotten familiar with, but then shifting it, what are you doing to try and champion the brand, which is now a new product that some people may feel like they've got to be re-educated on, even though the core passion points are the same?
There's things that are difficult about it, and there's going to be things that are actually helpful about it. I think with the new brand and separating focused conversation on cannabis and the cannabis consumer and really focusing on the home grower, it allows the messaging to be a little bit more simple, which can actually be easier to speak in all of these different countries instead of having to discuss all of the brands that Boveda used to cover. We could be really narrow in our approach. So that's helpful from like the brand standpoint. And then when it comes to execution, it is still like anything. It's going to be relationships with people in market, understanding who's influential, who has the pulse on the home grower community, how to reach them, really just connecting to who those key retailers are, who are educating. Yeah, the relationships are really what's going to help us get to the next level now that message and the look and the feel is created.
Yeah, and I dig it. I will say that initially when I first saw it, and since I live in Mexico most of the time, when I saw Vivi, my mind read Viva, but now we can just say Viva Vivi, and it works out quite well. So,
Yeah.
But what was the trigger? What was the trigger that said, okay, we really need this, right? Because Boveda does have a well-anchored brand that's been around for decades. And I can speculate on what it might have been, but that's probably a bad idea. So, Emily, what was it that made the team go, yeah, we need to segment this out and make a change?
Yeah. So it was about 2024. We were at, our entire company always gets together at least one time per year at a little event called BovaCon, which is really, really great to just kind of like take a step out of our everyday and talk about the business and talk about where we want to be as a brand. And we had been seeing Boveda pop up in smoke shops across all different relative humidity levels right next to each other, really not understanding the differentiation between them. And so it started with, should we redesign the packaging so that cannabis and tobacco are a bit more differentiated? But as we really took a look at our company as a whole, we decided, the right thing to do is to do what's not convenient and to do what is very, very difficult, but really look at us as a house of brands. We have to be focused. We have to be very, very targeted with our messaging. And I think what we are finding is that if the more we wanted our brand to kind of be everything to everyone, the more diluted the messaging was becoming. And then the more opportunities were happening, such as, entering in a smoke shop and people not actually understanding which RH to choose, just choosing what was there or what was most available or what, the worker was telling them to do or what was cheapest at the time. So it was a big decision. I don't want to lie that this has been very simple or easy, but it's the right thing to do for the longevity of our brand in the cannabis space. So that's kind of what kicked it all off. And like I said, it would have been a lot more convenient just to stay with Boveda, but we believe that this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, in the short run, it would have been more convenient, but in the long run, not so much. And I will congratulate both of you and the team at large for seeing that, because far too many companies in the cannabis industry are really only focused on the next 2 or 3 months. And, the ability to plan and think years down the road is lacking, and to our detriment, because I get the short-term thinking. It's a rough market, but you keep doing it that way for quarter after quarter, and eventually you're gone because people don't know how to react, right? This year alone, the GCNC, we're certainly active in European markets and we're active in North America and South America, but we're starting to add a lot more activity in Africa and Asia coming up in the summer and fall. We treat our brand very differently in markets that don't know us as well versus, places that we've been for the last 6 or 7 years. How are you treating the launch differently depending on sort of recognition or not? Or is it just Boveda's always been in all these places, so it's sort of the same approach, whether it's Thailand or Johannesburg or
Historically, we have always been a small team with big ambitions and big goals. So having, a small team that has a product in, I think, over 55 countries for cannabis alone, over 120 with the full range of products that we offer, it's a challenge. So there is, I think we're taking this approach really slowly, which is somewhat the right move, focusing on the bigger markets that we have the most influence right now and kind of moving forward with the steps that are obvious. I mean, it's very obvious that North America is a very online-driven place. People get Amazon deliveries multiple times a day. So there's a strategy there that might be a little bit different from a more nuanced base. So we're taking the time to really focus on the largest markets where we have the most brand recognition, the tightest relationships currently, and looking at them independently in a way that we never did before. Saying, is there a different approach needed based on the intel we get from people we work with in South Africa? Likely, compared to Brazil. So there may be frustration, with us and with customers that things are moving a little bit slowly. Slowly allows you to move smoothly, and smooth is fast in the long run. And that's going to help us get the best outcome in the long run rather than just trying to shove everything down the supply chain that we have existing. Again, it's the more difficult move that we believe is going to be more intentional in the long run. So yeah, that may look like different package configurations for different markets, different price points. A consumer in Germany has a very different expectation than someone in Chile. And so we have to accommodate in order to be successful in the long run.
No, that's great. I will admit, I have been in circles at industry conferences asking opinions of why people think Vivi is taking their time and rolling out. But even chatter, I think, is probably good for you guys because people are talking about it. As it gets introduced, right? People are like, "What's going on? Why is it taking so long? Or where did this come from?" And I mean, that's part of the fun, I think, as long as it's controlled, to have that conversation. Emily, you had said earlier, it makes the messaging more simple and you can really convey sort of what the product benefits are more clearly because you've got a more focused audience. When I teach classes on brand architecture and market positioning and all that, right? There's always, in an ideal world, there's always the unique selling point at the top, and then everything flows out from under that. So what is the message? What is the simplicity behind it when somebody might be hearing it for the first time, we'll pretend for a second. Like, what is that key selling point that people are buying into?
The unique selling proposition is that Vivi really gives you confidence, and it takes out the guesswork when it comes to post-harvest cure. There's obviously the functional benefits, like, we maintain aroma and weight, and we create a better smoking experience. But most importantly, we really take out that guesswork. We don't want you to have to think when you are storing or when you are curing. And when I think about where we were, everything is very, very important, and it kind of like feeds into that simple messaging. Like, I don't think you get the privilege of being simple without doing all of the hard work and the back end work to it. So that comes to water activity, relative humidity, terpene shield. Like, all of that is so important and foundational to what we do and what we communicate. But at the end of the day, the average cannabis consumer who cares about their storage is not necessarily thinking about water activity as they, smoke something that's super, super dry. So we're not losing any of that complexity or that scientific proven background, but we're really just communicating it in a lot more simple of a way of saying that, like, hey, you shouldn't have to think so hard. Like, you deserve to have a really good flower experience, and we're going to make that easy for you.
Yeah, amen to that. Anything that makes me think less is probably good. We were supporting the science of smokability study that you guys supported a while back, and last year. It wasn't all that long ago, and spent a lot of time talking about water activity and all of the nuance behind that. And I love the science; it's great. But yeah, afterwards, you have to take a nap, because it really works the brain so much. But I think when we're talking about brands like this, it's really nice to have that simple message, but then be able to follow it up as people get deeper into the customer relationship with all the science and the activity. So for listeners, if you're listening and you didn't hear that webinar, smokability and how much water activity contributes into that, check it out. It's available on the GCNC WorldView platform, and certainly for members, it's behind the wall. It's on our platform as well. It was really interesting, and I understood a good 50% of it at least, which was great. I got out of the science side of the business quite a long time ago, but it's great to have people highly engaged with that. What I think what I'd like to talk about now, which is generally applicable not only to your brand, but a lot of brands across cannabis, is figuring out the right marketing mix. Like, how do we pick channels in a industry that is so difficult to operate in some channels? So where are you guys finding success? And Kate, whether you want to lead with this one, or Emily, I leave it up to you on this one. But which channels are you finding the most success in, and how are you diversifying your marketing mix to try and find the right pathways?
It's not surprising to hear that having a diverse channels is the way to success. Especially building a consumer brand, though, is something that I think there is a little bit of tension in this industry, because there's so much that is a B2B conversation. But at the end of the day, Vivi is a consumer brand first and foremost. It is for the home growers. So that may look like what we're doing is a little bit different than some other brands may opt for. But there is still a healthy mix of events. Like, we are definitely still being present at many events in many countries this year. Really, really strong presence on social. We're really, building that social community and following and engagement with followers across, YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and things like that. And I think, influential home growers and just influential people in different markets. So influencers, social events, still very much obviously a robust, email platform too. I'm sure there's a lot of digital that I don't know as much about. So I'll maybe jump to Emily to.
Yeah. And I think marketing is so interesting because there's not a proven playbook, especially in the last few years, as AI and digital and everything. It changes every single year and every single quarter. But I think what we keep asking ourselves is, like, just because it's something we've always done doesn't mean we have to keep doing it. And we really have to keep going back to the end consumer of how they're experiencing the brand, whatever that in whatever instance that is. And so I understand that, not everything is going to lead to a positive ROI, but we have different measures of ROI for different things. And so where we've been finding a lot of success is advertising through Meta with really quick hit advertising placements, but then more of that long-term side of things like influencer partnerships of weaving it into, it doesn't interest me necessarily to do a quick hit, like let's get you on a banner ad in this one-time instance, but how are we going to kind of keep engaging with that audience in different ways and really naturally incorporate into the content? So it's definitely changing. It's always thinking about what that brand looks like in that instance, and then really being honest about what is the true ROI here, knowing that it's not always just going to be revenue.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I have enjoyed working with Boveda on over the last several years on various partnerships is that your team collectively seems to be able to bifurcate short-term results and long-term goals, and which a lot of brands can't, whether you're in cannabis or not, right? It's always like, what have you done for me lately? And if you haven't achieved everything in 2 seconds, then you must have failed, which is the curse of most CMOs around the world, regardless of industry. And I've always been an advocate of using a push strategy to get the message into the pipeline, and then a pull strategy trying to educate consumers on the far end, so that those two things work together and you can maximize all of these different data points along the way. The advent of AI tools in tracking that kind of data is both wonderful and a curse, because I think we get buried at this point in information that can't always be immediately used, but it does make it fun. And I mean, if you geek out on marketing beta, it makes it fun. If you don't, it's horrific. But
yeah, one thing that I just want to add is also just looking internally at our structure of, we have this great blessing. Kate and I have a great blessing of just being able to be a lot more iterative in our testing and just go out there. We have a brand sales team where we actually combined our brand marketing and sales together. And we're all about, testing, reacting, and I would call us the hunters of trying to find the audience, trying to find the right people. And then we have a separate e-commerce team, and they're all about conversion and thinking about our brand experience on platforms. And then on top of that, we have our strategic marketing side of things. So really looking at the longevity and long-term of the brand. So I think having the right structure in place also allows us to be a lot more experimental in our approach to find out what works. So
I love that. And I mean, for anybody that's listening to this, if you can just replay the last 45 seconds over a few times, it'll be worth it, because test and learn philosophies, using multiple teams and allowing those teams to try new things without the fear of decimation should a couple of new ideas not always work, produces excellent results almost all the time, over time. It's the one where everybody's just scared for their life if a single tactic fails, where you just get crushed. So it's part of what I think allows you now to introduce a new brand and build in. Because without team structured like that, somebody's always going to be too scared to take a risk. So, congrats on that. Over the next couple of months, Kate, where are you going to be hanging out with this new brand and talking? We've got a lot of industry stuff coming up.
I'm excited. I mean, I think to no one's surprise, I'll be in Berlin twice. So I think it'll be fun to be at ICBC, talking on the commercial side more. We really work with a lot of pharmacies. They're kind of one of our first points of access to patients in Germany. So that'll be an exciting thing to talk about with the pharmacies. And then followed soon after by having a really large presence of the Vivi brand at Mary Jane. That's many thousands of people. That's going to be really exciting. So that's where I'm most excited about, definitely. So, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I frequently get overwhelmed at the consumer events. So many people. But I wish you well in that one. Mary Jane is nuts, so that should be fun.
Yeah,
and
it
Emma,
is. But you know what? That's where our core customer is. You know, it's a show focused on home growers, so it's where we need to be. And I think that energy and the liveliness of the brand will really resonate with that group of people. Certainly.
yeah, and out of curiosity, because I think people forget this, that Brazil sits down at the end of South America so much, and it's this enormous market. I know we briefly touched on it, but are you guys doing a push down there yet, or is that one that's sort of on the horizon?
It's in the works, in discussion, in process.
All right, we'll have to
Hopefully I'll have
more
an
of that
update for you
discussion.
soon. Yes.
We'll have to have that conversation
Mhm.
offline, perhaps. That was a hedged
Right.
response. But for what it's worth, GCNC is in that same kind of thing. Like, we are actively getting more engaged in the Brazilian market as that continues to mature. And I bring it up frequently because it's such an important market. While people focus on Central Europe, it often gets put by the wayside by big focus thing. So I'm championing for some of the regions of the world I want to go to more often. As we close this out, Emily, I wanted to ask, like, where do you see this going? You've indicated we're looking at a sort of a cadence rollout, a timed rollout, but what's the hope for the Vivi brand? You know, let's just say 2 years out, because that feels like forever in cannabis. But
So 2 years out, we will have transitioned everything officially from Boveda all the way to Vivi. I think there's a lot of opportunity as we really, really stay focused and just think about how our technology fits into post-harvest care. We want to be the first brand that comes to mind when you think post-harvest care. I think also just expanding into more and more consumers' hands, maybe people who are a little bit outside of the traditional cannabis industry structure, but really just maximizing our reach when it comes to the everyday cannabis consumer. And yeah.
great. And Kate, how about you? From the international aspect and what you're working on, what's your hope to see as this rollout continues?
I'm just excited for the Vivi brand to be in all of these places that we talk about. You know, like Europe is kind of the first focus, but you know, I think in the next year, 2 years, we'll have the brand, you know, really, really well presented in Australia, in Thailand, in Brazil, you know, in Mexico, in all of these kind of key markets. And there's just so much. It's so rewarding to see something come to life and be available and have something that people recognize, like the Boveda brand. That is like a struggle right now, is seeing how all the work that was done and feeling like we're starting over. But I think people will be as excited or more excited about this as it comes to be. So yeah, it's always fun.
You're not starting over. Like, the Boveda brand has elevated the whole category in a way that just didn't really exist in people's minds before, and you're building off of an excellent platforms. In all the places that I travel, there's maybe 3 or 4 brands total across cannabis that you see all over the place, and it'll be cool to see Vivi sort of enter into that same kind of echelon over the next couple of years. I'm excited for you, and considering you're GCNC members, I'm excited for us collectively to help tell that story as well. So, and
be sure to touch base with you and have your eyes on all of these places for me too.
I love that. I mean, it gives me those extra things while I'm walking to coffee shops and going into other places to be able to check it out while we're there. So, thanks guys so much, and thanks everybody for listening. If you have questions, we're all pretty easy to find on LinkedIn, websites, and certainly through the links for the podcast. So, engage, ask questions, and it'll be neat to see the brand out and around the world over time. If you haven't subscribed yet, do that. God's sakes, it's been 4.5 years, so get on it. And we look forward to seeing you all again here in a couple of weeks. But thanks, Kate. Thanks, Emily, for joining us on GCNC WorldView.
Thanks so much, Chris.